So we know that the House passed through a spending bill at the last minute yesterday to avert a government shutdown. And we knew that the reason they did that was to keep the government open, but that they could not feel that they could include aid to Ukraine in that shutdown bill, despite overwhelming bipartisan support for aid to Ukraine. So it seems pretty clear that Kevin McCarthy stripped the aid to Ukraine to try and save some kind of face or win some kind of mercy points with the Freedom Caucus led by Matt Gaetz. Well, it seems not to have worked very well, because here is Matt Gaetz on CNN saying he does plan to make a motion to oust Kevin McCarthy from the speakership sometime this week. So let's take a look at this.
Are you going to make a motion to vacate?
Speaker McCarthy made an agreement with House conservatives in January, and since then he has been in brazen, repeated material breach of that agreement. This agreement that he made with Democrats to really blow past a lot of the spending guardrails we'd set up is a last straw. And then overnight I learned that Kevin McCarthy had a secret deal with Democrats on Ukraine. So as he was baiting Republicans to vote for a continuing resolution without Ukraine money, saying that we were going to jam the Senate on Ukraine, he then turns around and makes a secret deal. Now, I know you and I probably have different views on U.S. involvement in Ukraine, but however you think about that question, it should be subject to open review, analysis, and not some backroom deal.
Okay, so I just want to pause for here for 1 second, because so far, from what I could see, and I checked right before the show, so unless I was looking in the completely wrong spot, which I don't usually do, or unless something broke within the last 40 minutes, we still don't know to what extent, or if at all, there's been a backroom deal about Ukraine funding. This is what he's saying, right? But there's been no real reporting of that I could see, at least at the time that we're doing this. Here we go.
So
Motion to vacate tomorrow?
I do intend to file a motion to vacate against Speaker McCarthy this week. I think we need to rip off the Band-Aid. I think we need to move on with new leadership that can be trustworthy. Look, the one thing everybody has in common is that nobody trusts Kevin McCarthy. He lied to Biden. He lied to House conservatives. He had appropriators marking to a different number altogether. And the reason we were backed up against this shutdown politics is not a bug of the system, it's a feature. Kevin McCarthy's goal was to make multiple contradictory promises, to delay everything, back us up against shutdown politics, and at the end of the day, blow past the spending guardrails he'd agreed to.
So how many Republicans do you think will be with you in your motion to vacate? Because obviously, for people at home who don't know, you need 218 votes to get him out of the speakership. You don't have 218 Republican votes. You're going to need Democrats. Let's start with the Republicans. How many Republicans do you have?
Well, enough so that when you host this show next week, if Kevin McCarthy is still the Speaker of the House, he will be serving at the pleasure of the Democrats. He will be working for the Democrats.
See, that's talking like a boss. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. That's how you bring the ruckus to your party leadership. Lines like that. That's how it's done. That's how it's done. He doesn't let up. He goes a little more. Well, this is almost over.
The only way Kevin McCarthy is Speaker of the House at the end of this coming week is if Democrats bail him out. Now, they probably will. I actually think that when you believe in nothing, as Kevin McCarthy does, everything's negotiable.
Okay, but
and I think he'll cut a deal with the Democrats.
Let's be honest here, though, because if you succeed in vacating him, you also will have to make a deal with the Democrats. You also will have to get Democratic votes to kick him out.
Absolutely. I will make no deal with Democrats and concede no terms to them. I actually think Democrats should vote against Speaker McCarthy for free. I don't think I should have to deal them anything.
You're not going to cut any deals with him?
Absolutely not. And I don't think that any Republicans that share my view on Speaker McCarthy would cut deals with Democrats. But here's the thing. I'm done owning Kevin McCarthy. Right? We made a deal at the end of in January to allow him to assume the speakership, and I'm not owning him anymore because he doesn't tell the truth. And so if Democrats want to own Kevin McCarthy by bailing him out, I can't stop him, but then he'll be their speaker, not mine.
Could you imagine?
That's how fast it takes for a guy to get whacked.
Could you imagine AOC saying, Nancy Pelosi stands for nothing. We're going to file a motion to vacate. And if she is still here by this time next week, it will be at the pleasure of the Republican Party. The Republicans can have her. I don't want to own her anymore. She's the Republicans' problem if they want it. He wins either way here. This is what's really brilliant about him going on here and saying this. And Jake Tapper, you could see, is so not used to politicians acting this way and doing this sort of flex, because what Matt Gaetz says is, hey, you know what? I come out of this with the power either way. I come out of this with the bigger dick either way, because if we don't get rid of Kevin McCarthy, we now can paint Kevin McCarthy as the ultimate rhino, as a literal rhino, because he will be serving at the pleasure of the Democratic Party. So they win if they get rid of him. They win if they don't get rid of him, because he comes off as the power player within the party either way, regardless of the outcome, which is very good for him and his caucus long term. And that is the kind of power politics that AOC and the squad refuse to play. But look at how well it works there. Look at what a boss he looks like there. He can't lose. He can't lose.
I don't know. He's causing a lot of relational harm.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, that old relational harm. Darn it, the founders talked about. Yeah, this really, once again, just puts the lie to everything they said about force the vote. There were also some segments of that interview that were interesting. In addition, so we
it goes
covered
on for
that
about 10 minutes. Yep.
Yeah, we covered that Vox article the other day that talked about how the founders had erred too far on the side of avoiding majoritarian tyranny, making it very easy for a determined minority to come up the works. So that this kind of poses the question. I think there's something to that, as much as we tore apart that article. That wasn't the part we were tearing apart. But that's not a bug, that's a feature. Like, this is exactly why they did that. So if you see what McCarthy's saying, they're stopping funding for a war that we should not be involved in, but the majority is so beholden to defense contractors that the majority cannot be trusted to do the right thing by the American people and frankly by the world community. So you have a determined minority, whatever their motives, whatever their reasons, that's actually stopping that funding. That if anything is an argument for the wisdom of the way that the system was set up to allow a determined minority to stop the government, because that was the whole idea. The founders were deeply suspicious of the kind of corruption that sets in with all governments, right? I mean, they were very much, speaking of Athens, they were very much looking at the way the Roman and Greek democracies fell. That was why they were so suspicious of having the majority with no checks on it, because they looked at that past and they looked at how the majority had given up democracy ultimately. So they set it up so that it was very, very difficult for any large majoritarian faction to take complete control without satisfying all of these different groups and factions. Okay, well, they're doing what the system was designed to do. They're stopping the government from making terrible decisions, which are largely based in corruption. I mean, it's largely based in enriching their defense contractor donors. Also very interesting. Do you see anybody in power talking about BRICS and de-dollarization as they should be?
Yeah,
Because
and
it's
Gaetz does bring that up
existential-
later in this interview. He says we're running up debts as countries are moving away from the dollar. Right.
Right. Which, hey, that is worth talking about, because I'm no fucking economist. But my understanding, and I think it's correct based on people who are smarter than I am about these matters, discussing it and listening to them, our whole economy is built around the dollar being the world's reserve currency. And that's why we're able to get away with running these kinds of deficits, because we keep getting money into the treasury by selling treasury bills, and that's how we get away with it. If the dollar starts to lose its value, the entire premise of our economy collapses, particularly our enormous military budget and presence, which again, talking about empires of the past, military overextension and the economic commitments that come with it is always a factor in imperial collapse. So here you want to talk about, oh, Gaetz, all these guys, they're crazy. I don't know, man. It's pretty fucking crazy when your whole economy is based on the dollar being the world's reserve currency to have none of your leadership talking about that. And yet this minority that is both shutting down funding for the Ukraine war and discussing it, I don't know, they seem a lot less crazy than the people in charge in a lot of respects.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a really good point. One more thing I want to add on here. He not only comes off looking big and powerful, but he made an absolute ass of Kevin McCarthy here. McCarthy made an absolute fool of himself, because what I don't understand about this is McCarthy passed this spending bill without aid to Ukraine. The final vote was 335 to 91. So we had overwhelming bipartisan support, including almost every single Democrat. Okay? Maybe every single Democrat. I should have known that for sure before we went live, but idiot, I forgot to confirm that. But virtually every single Democrat. Okay? Which means he could have just as easily passed this bill with funding for Ukraine, right? Unless no Republicans would have voted for funding for Ukraine. But come on, there's a handful of warmongering Republicans left in the caucus. After all, most Republicans express support for Ukraine.
Well, McConnell.
Which means, McConnell, he's in the Senate. I'm talking about in the House.
But just saying.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of Republican leadership, they're not anti-war by any means.
No. Of course not. Which means he could have gotten a bill passed with funding for Ukraine in it, which means the reason he cut it out has to be because he thought that in cutting funding for Ukraine out of the bill, he would save some face with Matt Gaetz, or maybe get some mercy from Matt Gaetz, which, idiot that I am even, I could have told him that wasn't going to happen. If you circumvented the Freedom Caucus and used the Democratic Party to push through a bipartisan bill, there was going to be hell to pay from the Freedom Caucus. I could have told you that. So it seems like he cut aid to Ukraine out of the bill just to try and win some goodwill with a faction of his party that was going to come for him anyway if he jumped over them. So what a moron he looks like. He cut aid to Ukraine, and they're going to move to remove him anyway. I mean, talk about having egg on your face. What a fuck up that is. That's the kind of fuck ups you only used to see on the Democratic Party. You're not used to seeing Republicans fuck up that like that.
Well, that's Speaker of the Republicans, leader of the Republican caucus in the House. That's become the worst job in Washington. John Boehner saw that. It was like, I'm drinking some scotch, smoking a cigar.
Yeah, that's it.
Do some Viagra ads, whatever, man. I'm fucking out of here. He knew what he was about. He saw where this was going. He saw, now you're going to have this really determined caucus that's just going to make the life of any speaker hell, or any leader of the Republican caucus hell. And we've gone quite a distance from where it was under Boehner. And it was pretty unmanageable under Boehner. Now, it's just open warfare. It's just now they've gotten a taste of what they can do if they stick together as a bloc, and they're never going back. They're never going back to Republicans fall in line. I mean, not in the foreseeable future.
Please clap.